Welcome to Deep Thoughts again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Crystal Clear Audio. Apparently the audio jack in the camera is just crap, so it never was quiet. And so I would stick other cable, like headset cables, into the same audio box, and it's crystal clear, so something's up with the way that the grounding works on the wire. I might end up fixing it later, but we're just going to go with the old-fashioned techniques. I got my PC here in front of me, crank it out the track. I can watch the vocals look perfect on there, no hum. So I'm cruising Facebook, and it's one of those guilty things I do. And I noticed that one of our listeners had posted an interesting set of flat Earth pictures. And to be fully disclosed, I think he told me that he's not necessarily a flat earther, but he's curious, and I have to say, some people get all butthurt about the flat earth thing. Oh my God, you're so stupid for talking about it. It's like, oh, okay. Thought police. Go to another video. The thing is this set of memes was very interesting. It was like 4 pictures. And this episode is not about flat earth. It's going to be called Observable Reality. Because what this set of pictures did was show you, obviously, a couple pictures of the Earth very flat, the ocean, and I think a plane or something like that, like a dirt plane, right? Like a field or something like that. I come from Kansas, so I know what flat looks like, trust me. It's not terribly flat where I lived, but when you head out west and you get in that Truman Show wheat field area about halfway across Kansas, oh my God, it's so flat. It's just surreal. The clouds are all little puffy little things in the sky. Of course, last time I saw this, they weren't spraying us with this thing that's supposedly been around since planes have been around. Really funny. But what it shook out of me, and so what the meme said was something to the effect of, saying that the world's flat is not a conspiracy, because that's what you see. What's a conspiracy is someone telling you that it's round. And what it's trying to say to you is, you were told to demonize your observable reality. And isn't that really what we are seeing in the 2020 with all this crazy censorship? So what I want to get at is some more examples of observable reality for some of us, because some of you have observed things, some of you haven't. But there's probably someone that you know that you trust who perhaps has seen something that they wholeheartedly believe. And I think that we can't lose track of this mechanism, because the mechanism is one of cognitive dissonance seeding in your brain. Now, for any of you who are probably 40 or older and you have a relatively decent education on history, you will probably either subconsciously felt what I'm about to say, or you're consciously dismayed because what I'm about to say is something that you're finally observing. I was born in 1969 in August. Technically speaking, it's 25 years after the World War II. And so there are always things that are trendy to learn in whatever period pocket you're born in. But the heresy of dictators in this world is something that we have, in my generation, was heavily taught. And if you're older than me, it's probably even more intense. Because they were trying to say, if you see something like this happening again, you got to stop it. You don't just say something, you got to stop it. And I'm pretty sure, this is the realization you're probably having, is that what the deep state has done is they have brilliantly figured out, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to lean away from all these classic plays out of the tyranny playbook in the schools. We're not going to teach it anymore. We're going to keep you busy with a bunch of crap that won't help you get a job, confuse you sexually, confuse you morally, just bankrupt you morally, right? Meaning morals are never taught in school. Because someone would say, well, that's not the job of the school. Well, then who is it? You hate churches if you're deep state, right? They use all this 2020 stuff to keep people from driving in a confined car with the family they're already shacked up with at home. So if anyone's sick, the whole family's sick, right? Windows up, just driving to the parking lot to be within broadcast range of the shortwave radio that the preacher's using inside the church to talk to your car. And you have these scumbag cops from the South giving everybody $1,000 ticket. I mean, I can't wait to see that go to court, man. I can't wait to see those cops getting removed from the force for life. You violated the Constitution, baby. You violated everything because somebody told you to, and that's all it took. They phoned it in, and boom, tyranny's on top of us, right? But they waited until the kids knew nothing about Mussolini, Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong. You don't know anything about them, and so they go, okay, great, now no one knows the plays anymore. If this is a football match and the other players had never seen the plays that made, Super Bowl 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, be like the Steelers and the Cowboys, man, everyone got tired of the playbook because they just kept using the same plays against each other. Now you can run them all again. And so what we see from these organizations that claim to be anti-Mussolini, using his flag, changing the colors from red to black. Apparently it's a really old organization formed in, I believe, Germany or something. But now it's been rebranded, completely different. It's all about getting rid of observable realities and complying with whatever is trendy at that point in time. And the trend is always the same exact trend. Your freedoms are only our decision away from disappearing. You have no inalienable rights as a human being anymore with these groups. Socialism, communism, yeah, that's definitely where these groups are lured into. And of course, the groups that are manipulating these low vibration human beings, well, you know what? They don't have to work that hard because we're not talking about a bunch of smart kids. We're talking about the kids that still live with their parents. Privileged kids. Don't have to pay their bills. And of course, they want that existence for the rest of their lives. The emperor with no clothes on, as I've mentioned several times in several episodes. It was a fabled tale to wake everyone up to cognitive dissonance. You are no longer to acknowledge reality for what it looks like. You are to take some superstitious mathematical belief about your reality and absorb it 100% without any verification. But what is verification? Today, its most elaborate form is probably the deep fake, where it's amazing, right? They hook the geometry of one person's face mathematically on top of someone else's face, and as they move their mouth, they've got all the differential algorithms now to figure out its 3D contour. So someone turns their head and stuff, they know exactly how that foreshortening of the pattern of the other person's face on the subject's face. And boy, does it ever look real, doesn't it? Indistinguishable. They're going back to all these old movies where they rebooted Star Trek, with a bunch of actors, and they put all the original OG 60s actors on their faces, and they're running scenes, and it's phenomenal. They did Solo the other day and put Harrison Ford's face on there. They redid Princess Leia in The Force Awakens. Amazing. Or no, it wasn't Force Awakens. It was the other one. Rogue One. Amazing. So now, visual verification, what you would consider to be your observable reality mechanism to verify something is true or false. Well, I'll give you a little hint. If you're looking into a projected screen of any kind, your telephone, your computer, your TV, an iPad, a tablet, any fabricated replication of reality, you can't trust it. You can't trust it if it's on your side, and you can't trust it if it's on the other guy's side. The only thing you can trust is what you see with your own eyes. And We've talked about at length of how that could be fabricated. There are rumors of hologram technology. And there's two different arteries that I've heard this from. And I apologize to people who have photographic memories. And you're like, dude, you've said this before. When I was involved with creating the first high-definition LED 3D experiences with my startup in 16 and 17, and then working on it in 18, or even worked on it this year as a free advisor, I was learning about all kinds of these, the Pepper's Ghost techniques where Tupac and Dio and a few people have come back to life and they're projected on glass. It's much more refined Pepper's Ghost, but if any of you have been to Disneyland or Disney World and you've seen the Haunted Mansion, you will have undoubtedly seen the room where there's characters dancing downstairs. And the way that's working is they're projecting light at tilted glass, and you see the reflection in perfect proportion, such that it looks like there's ghosts in the room. It's amazing. Well, they use that same technology, except instead of making it ghostly, which means you can see through it, they've got it so you can't see through it that much. And there's Japanese animation bands that perform, and now a lot of other countries are doing it. I'm actually involved with the project that's going to use some of that technology. It's going to be crazy. But the other one I heard about was that so here we are creating this new venue, this new technology that people can experience with wearing just 15-cent cardboard glasses or whatever, maybe 25-cent plastic glasses, and have these amazing, three-dimensional experiences that would be utterly photoreal to your mind. But you're inside of an entertainment venue, and so you're not believing any of this is true. But the conversation went around with all these brilliant minds. I mean, we had the Academy show up. We had the top entertainment design firms in the world in terms of creating these experiences that only, kings and queens in the Middle East can pay for, and all. And they're telling us about the most cutting edge technology that is above board. Nothing secret. And so we get folks that have been dragged into these industries from, say, the military. And there is a new technology. In fact, I had a buddy who was an investment guy. He did venture funding, and he had a dude in Nevada who had perfected some holographic technology, and he's a really weird guy, and so he won't quite sign any contract to let his technology be used. I mean, he's a weird dude. He has something which I don't know exactly how it works, but I think you're still staring at a screen that's going to Pepper's Ghost something. One of them was that you could use lasers to burn oxygen and then project on the burned packet of oxygen. And so you burn a three-dimensional image of anything you want, and then you project light on it a split second after with another array of lasers, which can create all the colors in the spectrum, thus creating hard light to the mind, and you can't tell the difference, supposedly. Was it John Lear? He claimed that he had seen a demonstration where, I think it was General Colin Powell or someone had done a opening statement on stage saying what they're about to see will blow their mind in a couple seconds. And then the dude, according to John Lear, vanishes off the stage. And the joke was, that was the technology. You just saw a human being that you thought was real, and it was a hologram. Observable reality is now for sale. Observable reality has now been penetrated by technology. And I think that as you want to be awake, lucid, you're going to have to factor in all these evolutions of technology to make sure that what you think you see has at least a basis in being very, very difficult to be forged. Some people think the moon is, was it Project Blue Beam or something like that? And then it's actually an artificial construct projected by, I guess, the governments of the world or something. To what benefit? I have no clue. I mean, that's a lot of technology to add some thing in the sky. For what? I mean, we don't worship the moon anymore. I don't think anyone's turning into werewolves anymore, right? For me, I think it's pretty obvious that because criminals get taken into a court and something called evidence is presented, they absolutely love this blurred line that's being created by the deepest forces of the world to shroud and confuse and injure the credibility of anything that can be brought into a court of law. We've got politicians that simply, they're dead to rights on video doing things that are criminal, and they just go up during their debates and they just say, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true. Repetition being the greatest form of brainwashing. And if you already have a blue pill group of people that do not want to hear the truth, case closed, man. Case closed. I mean, you can't even get the case into court at this point, you know? So they love it. They get to do all their heinous things to society, including re-engineering the planet back into a tyrannical world, which is happening at an alarming rate. Now, I was going to create an episode that was dedicated to this one realization, but I think it fits here really well. As I told you in recent episodes, I've been rereading the Bible very, very slowly. I need to get back on it. And I was shocked at, first I was shocked at what stories were in what books. I had things completely confused and thinking that there were other chapters, and Genesis holds a tremendous amount of information that I thought was actually in other books, which is interesting. But when I dialed into the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve and the story of the serpent and the tree, who, as we all know the story, convinces Eve to eat the apple and then tricks Adam into eating the apple. And then, of course, all hell breaks loose. And a friend of mine who's actually a devout believer has been recently rereading it too. And he was like, then they said they were banished to go hang out with the other people. And he goes, man, where did the other people come from? I thought Adam and Eve were the only two people there. And he's like a total literal believer of everything, right? But rereading it, something caught my eye, which was what the devil said to Eve to convince her to eat the apple. It kind of ties into observable reality and knowledge in general. He promised her that if she ate the apple, that all that God was keeping her from seeing would be seen. The fact that she's naked, and perhaps some other unknown bunch of the universe. And I thought that was very, very interesting, because we're always trying to make out what man thought the devil was and what man thought God was. And like I've said in several episodes, the catalyzing character to get this whole story going, to create, at least in Western Christianity, this original sin, which is what you have to constantly in Western religion get baptized for. The idea would be, you might be a person that considers yourself fairly red-pilled, right? In some category of something, maybe not all categories, but whatever you like to research. You go down a rabbit hole, as they say, and you red pill yourself. You take in as much data as you possibly can, and you do your very best to sort through it. And then you find out there's tricksters out there. Let's say that NASA accidentally airs something that's fairly damning. So they can't really unair what they aired. Maybe it was a live feed of a guy going by in a harness in the background, which is definitely a reality. There was one where a guy went down a tube in the space station, and then he grabs the door jamb to sling himself around the door jamb, 0G, really fast, right? But someone slowed it down and realized that the guy was actually fading out of the frame before he turned the corner, meaning it looked like a green screen situation or some sort of bad compositing. It was definitely bad compositing. So I don't know if what I'm about to say is true or not, but I started thinking about that footage and I thought, well, imagine someone had the legitimate footage of the guy going down that pipe and he turns the corner and it's all good. There's no fading of opacity or anything. And someone trying to create a YouTube channel to rape a bunch of people of, ads, takes the footage, re-edits it. And because you have the wall before the guy gets there, already in a plate shot, meaning you've got it without him there. You can overlay at a future frame this plate resing up on top of the guy, thus making him go transparent, making the footage look fake. And you could put that out there. And then someone else, you could get really bold with that footage and tell your family and friends for years. And they're like, you're nuts. And you're like, no, man, you're stupid. Maybe even drag some of your family members into it. And they're like, yeah, you guys are stupid. And then later on, NASA releases the real footage and proves that you're wrong, that you've been had by a charlatan online. Your credibility goes to the floor. This is one of the reasons why these observable reality technologies that interfere with our ability to see things, I think, are being created. When you can't trust your reality, I think that makes people really, really nervous, right? Because we have a group of people in this world that believe, quite frankly, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's a tremendous amount of logic in that. Some of my most talented, wealthy friends in the world practice that and have practiced it for 40 plus years, if not longer. And honestly, they did benefit greatly. One, they accumulated wealth because they didn't need to replace computers that still ran, TVs that still turn on, whatever, cars that still drive, all that kind of stuff. But what are we taught? We're taught to keep up with the Joneses. If you're single, well, you can't roll up with a 1985 BMW that has corroded paint and try to pick up your girlfriend, because unless she's programmed like you are, that material objects are a waste of time and money. Unless she believes that if it ain't broke, don't fix it, she's going to look at you and go, are you a loser? Why do you have a really old car? You know, most guys realize it takes more money to keep an old car running. So that's why we usually upgrade, because everything's built to break at this point. It's interesting that conversations about, say, spirituality are pretty rare in the world, depending on what kind of friends you have. I find that I have them maybe 10% of the time, if not 5% of the time. It's because we're sitting on this patio, we're smoking sticks, or we're at the lounge or whatever, or a restaurant or whatever. You're hanging with your buddies. And if someone has never had a spiritual experience, well, that realm of existence doesn't exist for them. And the more you talk about it, in most cases, they can't process the words coming out of your mouth. If they're real cowards, then they'll think that you're making it up to get attention. So it's important you're not the boy they call wolf, that you have a history of telling tall tales in order to get attention. But once you have an experience, let's say you're near death and you have a really spiritual life after death experience, and then you come back down to your body. And then because you're so profoundly affected by what you saw, you seek out other people who've had that experience. And then you compare notes with somebody, and there's a bunch of correlations. Now you're doubled down. And then you find out there's hundreds of people that have died, ascended away from their bodies, looked down on their bodies, looked at all the items in the room, that kind of stuff. And then they meet folks, and they're always told the same story. It's not your time yet. You got to go back down. Now, and some people love that realm, and they don't want to come back down to their bodies, even though they're young. Someone might even be married, might have kids, but it's so amazing up there, wherever that is, because it goes up. It's weird, which means it goes away from, perpendicular from the earth, which is another weird thing, right? Unless it's flat. But these people, I've seen them, and it used to be when you were young. I've said this before. When I was young, it was sort of like just any Joe in the world, and they never really did a big deep dive behind who these people are. Like, are you an intellectual? Are you scientific? Like, someone who believes in, everything supernatural that they've never experienced. Unfortunately, if they brought back a true story, you're just going to be a boy who calls wolf. Yeah, whatever. You always see everything. No, really. This time it's real. But we've got people that are pretty secular who've had these experiences, if not completely secular. People who converted to religion because they had these experiences and realized, oh my God, there's a God. I don't know exactly who this being is, But there's something else after this life, which means this one is actually fairly important, as mundane as it might seem to you. Then there's the other thing that I mentioned from time to time, which is you have a brain. Why do you have it? We know that if you educate yourself, you'll become sort of isolated in this world because you're going to be way over everyone else's head. And what's funny is it doesn't take a tremendous amount of research to get to the point where having a conversation with another human being starts to diminish in its return. Because if you're not learning something new, even if everyone you talk to is like on the edge of their seat, loving everything that you say, you'll have a positive experience with that, but you're not getting much out of it besides maybe feeling like you enlighten someone else. That's good, but that's not the whole picture, is it? When I talk to my writing mentor, I tell my friends, I say, look, for the first probably, I'd say 10 years of meeting with this guy, I would get in my car to go home, and I would be panting, literally, with this feeling like my brain was on the entire time I was with that dude. And politically, he and I are oil and water. But we're able to communicate. We're able to respect each other and get into it. And we don't talk about those differences necessarily. He talks, I listen, and then we get back on something more sexy, something more interesting, film writing or sciences or what have you. And he tends to swallow everything that's printed in a book because for him, books are legitimate, peer-reviewed circumstances. And I respect that. I was there too. I spent exhaustive decades combing those books, as I've said. But we're always looking for those pivot points in our life, right? Those points where your life changed because of this set of circumstances. But we're also in this era, in this new thing where you used to wake up by yourself, pretty much. You're doing research, and maybe even you could turn on the internet at some point in the 21st century and find, thousands, if not tens of thousands of people that believe exactly what you're starting to believe because you're starting to do your research and it makes sense. And you look back at your own life and you factor everything. You're like, man, that is the way it works. Holy crap. Wow, I'm awake now in this one area of life. But what if, somebody like that Russian KGB guy that was interviewed, he talked about how they were going to win the battle against the United States. And everything he said has come true. And this interview is old, man. It's 85, 86, somewhere in there. He talked about rotting the human minds of America by getting us all addicted to a bunch of stuff we don't need to be addicted to. And then if you showed an American the truth, they would deny it wholeheartedly. Now, at the time that he was saying this, special effects were pretty much in their infancy. You could probably see it coming. I'm not sure he was referring to anything like that, but now we know that that's true. So if someone said, okay, you want to organize your brain in a way that you can't be duped easily, it's becoming increasingly difficult, isn't it? So, I said to you guys a long time ago, scientists believe that if they can't build a machine to prove that something is real, then it is not real. Isn't that interesting? So, what do we use as a machine, technology, to track something's existence? We're always looking for slow-moving energy, which we call matter. They might use electrons one day. They might use some other gas another day. They're looking for something to disrupt something to confirm that it's there. And if something exists that's profound in our life, that plays a role every second that we're alive. So I just realized the camera wasn't plugged in, so I just shut off the first part of the audio, or video. So if you can't see the first part of the video, that's why. I'm so sorry. Can't believe as I optimize my workflow or change it, you just figure out one little thing and it all screws up. So I apologize for those who are coming through video. So these scientists are sort of our proxy to what we believe to be the precipice of reality, right? They tell us what's real, and then we believe it or not believe it. Well, that's a pretty powerful little weapon, right? How many times have you been told by a family member in some basic conversation that when you bring up, like for instance, flat earth, maybe you don't believe it yet or whatever, you're still just tossing it around. And you cannot engage in a logical conversation with anyone because right away it's heresy. Why? Well, because NASA said it was round. It's the only organization that said it's round. It's the only organization on the planet that can go 80 miles up into the air to most definitely see curvature. Anything under 80 miles, your eyeball's going to have a really hard time registering a bend at the end there. The atmosphere might even turn black way before that. You're still not at that point because there's a big-ass ball and you're a little teeny speck on it. That's why I like bringing up any subject matter that is so easily, pissed on. Those of you who believe you've seen some sort of spiritual apparition, whether it be totally humanoid or ghostly, once you see it, you're like, well, unless you're high on something, you saw what you saw. Those of you who've had premonitions that work out, well, it's pretty hard to have a premonition, and then it happens, something very specific. And then someone's telling you didn't actually have that experience because they haven't had that experience. And part of it's like that little boy playing with his toys, and he's got 10 toys. He finishes with toy number 1. You're sitting there waiting for him to get done with the one you want to play with. He goes to toy number 2. Seems to be having a great old time with toy number 2. But you pick up toy number 1, and the kid's like, no, that's mine. You can't touch it. All these are mine. Don't touch it. Bring your own toys. But if you brought a cool toy he wanted to play with, boy, he's going to want you to share. Spirituality in general, especially those who believe in, say, Christianity, because there's no other religion that I know of on earth, and I know they are out there, that has a Jesus-type character that is supposed to come back to save everyone, that's still current and still believed. There's been several of those in the past, because that story's been told a few times. So you're sitting there in this faith bubble, and you know that if it ever came to pass, or you die and you go up there and it's all real, then you're going to be glad that you stuck to your guns. But if you didn't believe it 100%, didn't practice it, so you're going up there, a POS, and you're sitting in front of God, and you've been, one of these politicians that we have in America, and you're now standing before God, and he's like, what happened, man, You're just going to get nervous the second you see those pearly gates. You got almost, whatever. It's going to take a lot of grace to get you through those doors, if it were true. There's this weird thing that we don't talk about, which you and I are going to talk about, which is this notion that if you can, how do I put this? If you can become an expert at one thing, you can be an expert at all things. And the more of these authoritarians of science that we adopt into our subculture, which is our household, and the conversations we have with friends, then we feel like we are walking around an oracle of truth to the degree we can remember accurately what has been claimed. And what's funny about that is each sector of society over time is maybe divided by, the faster the technology evolves, the time pocket gets smaller and smaller. So perhaps what we believe this decade wasn't believed last decade in a particular area, but then it starts to turn into 100-year segments because technology is moving a lot slower. And then goes to millennias, and then maybe epochs, tens of thousands of years of what they thought was possible wasn't possible. One of my favorite scenes in the original Planet of the Apes was when Charlton Heston, was with Cornelius and his wife, and I can't remember her name to save my soul. He folded a piece of paper into a paper airplane and threw it across the room. Very shortly after that, the chimpanzee, who was the scientist, the more orange-skinned monkey, comes in, and they said, he's, arguing with him, because he could talk, and none of the other human beings could talk. And so he was terrified of this human being because the chimpanzees held the tomes of history that said that man used to run the world and they inherited it and they conquered it. So you can't have man rise up again because of Rod Serling's ending, which basically suggested that we had apocalypsed out the world with nuclear weapons. And so you can kind of get behind the chimpanzees' caution to say human beings have to be repressed. Best that we genocide them all and make them extinct. Therefore, as we grow up, love us or hate us, we don't blow up the world with nukes. Even though they had a very militant ape force that kept everybody in check. And just as a little digression you guys might find interesting, I found a little YouTube video that said the strange thing that happened on the set of Planet of the Apes. I don't believe I've mentioned this. I mentioned it to friends, so hopefully this is not a repeat this year. But they said that as the groups of people that they created on set were the humans, which were all dressed like slaves, basically naked. And then they had the chimpanzees, the orangutans. I may have just said that wrong. The orangutan was the scientist group, sorry. Chimpanzees were the kind of nice, normal folks. And then the apes were the crazy militant gun shooting ones. And then technically on set, you had the crew. And they said when they used to break for lunch, without saying a word, all these groups split up into their own racial alignments, which coalesces with something that my buddy told me, who was a former prison guard. He said that over time they've brought a lot of these, because they're trying to end, racial segregation in prisons, I guess, a few times, and they kept bringing these heads of state from these various races, your white Aryan folks and your black folks and different representation. They said, can we break this up? Can we get rid of this whole thing that you've got going? And they said, no way. This is the way we survive. Because racism is going to pop out of this horrible universe you've created because you're torturing us, basically, in prison. And it's best that we stick with our own. So apparently that experiment's been conducted a few times. It's unrelated to the episode, but I thought you might like that little piece of trivia there. But Charlton Heston folds up this plane, throws it across the room. Our chimpanzee friends are just like immediately blown away, which just as a kid, I thought, oh my God, I was a child when I saw this as a rerun. And you make those planes as a kid. And then the orangutan comes in and he's yelling at them, don't mess around with these humans. They're bad news. And of course he's speaking, but he had his throat injured. So he was kind of just getting back to his throat there. And so the woman, I believe, picked up the plane and said, well, look at this. He made this. Boom. And she threw it across the room, proving that this human being had superior flight knowledge, the shape of a wing or whatever. And even we don't have that, she said. And the orangutan went over to the letter, or the piece of paper folded like a plane. He wads it up. And he says, don't ever do that again. Something to that effect, There's been tons of Star Trek episodes, Space 1999 episodes, all kinds of sci-fi things where you have foreign planets where this is part of the plot. There's technology and knowledge about things. In fact, I believe there was a Star Trek episode which ended with the human race finding out that it was actually derived from this reptile species. Very, very David Icke, right? But there was heresy. Oh no, sorry. Yeah, it was they thought that they were the descendants, or we were the descendants of them. And it turns out that they're the descendants of our dinosaurs or something like that. And it was heresy to think that they had evolved from a lesser being because they have a God in their world, and to say anything otherwise of being divinely created, then their God is less. And I'm sure we have the same thing on Earth, right? It's brilliant. But now, has technology, up until recently, well, actually, sorry, I'm being ridiculous in that statement. Technology has definitely improved our lives more than it has probably destroyed our lives or hurt us. However, because war is war, and it's ugly, and it's deadly, and it's torturous. It's torturous on every conceivable level for the soldiers that have to fight face to face and see things that they should never see in their entire existence, to the family members that lose their family members to war, or worse yet, you're in the country that lost. In fact, England won World War II technically, and it was psychologically damaged because of all the V-1 and V-2 rockets that were shot over there and bombings that occurred. All of Europe was completely destroyed mentally. I mean, mentally. And if anyone ever lied about the history of World War II, then there's been suffering that was unjust and really destroyed lives on a level that is hard to fathom. You had German citizens that were chemically or physically castrating themselves as males after World War II because they were so ashamed of what their countrymen did during World War II. Can you imagine that? No family for you, and you did it to yourself because you think your genes shouldn't move forward? Whoa. And, if you just do a little bit of psychological math for society, then what we're really talking about is the people that would do that to themselves are probably not the people that carry the gene in the first place. So the good people who would probably never have done the things that were said to have been done, they're the ones that destroy their DNA, which would have left behind the more aggressive DNA, who would never think of doing that such a thing. I'm not sure where the numbers are in that. It seems like a plausible situation, right? Okay. Well, we got nuclear weapons now. We've got just everything that just totally destroyed the world and all of humanity. But pound for pound, we've got technologies that really help us out now, having a richer life in some cases. But we all know, if you're older especially, that a lot of this technology is rotting our brains, shoveling pixel data into our homes that we should never see. From gruesome things to over-sexualized things to just straight up dogma about how the world should work, about what formulas of how to run a society are either going to be positive for society or negative for society. And oddly enough, in 2020, one of the most tyrannical forms of government, socialism and communism, of which, again, everyone who's ever gone into those realms finds out really quickly how bad it is. Countries that are accused of being socialistic do have issues with it, but they're not completely socialistic, which is interesting. But somebody said recently a really brilliant line, which is, well, they said two things. They said, a red pill person never becomes a blue pill person ever again. You ate the apple. You were being revealed to the world. Well, the world was being revealed to you, I guess. The other one is that no one ever flees from a capitalistic country to a socialistic country. They always go the other way. But supposedly capitalism is the thing we're supposed to destroy. And remember, capitalism is only one thing. It's not two things. There might be side effects, but all it means is that you have a concept, an idea that you want to bring into fruition, but you don't have the resources to pull it off because you've only just recently had the idea. Now, let's say you're 22 years old and you've got the next bread slicer, the most amazing invention. Maybe it cures cancer, maybe anti-gravity, whatever. And so you got to go seek money because you're 22 to build it. Now, if you can get that thing built and you're an Elon Musk kid, boy or girl, you will be revered for life and probably gain enough wealth if you can get the thing made that you can go off on your own with your own purse and do whatever you want. Sounds good, right? Well, you got to go capitalize your idea. You're going to have to beg people who are probably much older than you to give you money, and then you have to share the profits with them. They might even own your company in the end. But if you play your cards right, you continue inventing, because if you're an inventor, if you're an innovator and original thinker, well, that won't be your only idea you come up with. You'll think of many ideas. They can't buy that with money. Otherwise, they would. And so you continue on your second and third venture, making your money and making a name for yourself. That's capitalism. Doesn't sound too bad, but it comes with risks. You could hold out as a 22-year-old and hope no one else can get the idea figured out and capitalize before you, and you wait 30 years until you're 52, And now you've saved up all your pennies and now you finance your idea. Maybe it's not relevant anymore. Maybe you're too old to do it. Maybe you got sick, whatever. So capitalism is a mechanism to get things done. And employees don't realize that a lot of the companies they work for were capitalized into existence, which gave them the little check that they have. If that hadn't happened, they wouldn't have a job at all. But the interesting thing about the apple for me is that we're trying to be red-pilled, which is sort of the devil's promise to Eve. Eat this apple, and you will see what is unseen. So the question is, if that story is true, which yours truly does not believe it is true, what was the inverse formula of what the devil was saying? He was saying, God is sheltering you in this Garden of Eden. He is keeping you from knowing death, painful childbirth, which now is laced with menstruation, if you don't happen to use your eggs that month. All right. What else? You're naked. Didn't do much for women's lib, did it? Is God trying to keep us in the dark? Is that the bliss that we could live? If you've ever been a parent and you watch your kid go from that magic under 10 phase to the more, oh my God, society's going to start telling my kid what's good, which happens right away today, but not when I was a kid. And you start to see your kids suffer. I've said this thing to my friends a million times. In America, a boy will date off and on until he finds his spouse, if he has one. But a girl in America is told at the age, whatever age she starts getting a boyfriend, which is on average about 13 years old in America. Again, it's not a sexual relationship under most circumstances. But, they get addicted to it. And the woman is now told, the little girl is told, if you ever end up single, then you're broken. You're damaged goods. So always get yourself a boyfriend. Even if you just got to use the guy for 6 months to get the one you really want. That's the way we teach our girls to behave today. So any girl, woman, whatever, who can be by herself for any length of time in the modern age, she's amazing. She's the one you want to focus on, in my opinion. Obviously, you don't want her to be to the point she doesn't want to be with anybody. That happens too. But there's something to be said about a person who's comfortable in their own skin as well. This is a ludicrous question, but this answer that you're going to have in your head, which will most likely be figuratively correct, but not scientifically correct, will shake up your brain. I know you guys think about this. It's about observable reality formulas, right? How many paradigms of science do we absorb before we get the chance to actually start thinking for ourselves and research them and find out they're bunk? I've said a million times on the show, one of the greatest examples is gravity having the word phenomenon in its definition. The one word that is not allowed inside of any scientific realm is the basis of all cosmology, basis of all small particles, subatomic physics. It's the basis of all things. We have a formula that accurately calculates how whatever this force is works. But we're told immediately, almost like a Masonic secret, we know what it is, but you're not allowed to know what it is. And if you figure out what it is and you start to disturb our formula, it might do something to you. Just saying, something might happen to you. But today it is now turned into, in the last 5 years, last 4 years especially, the ostracizing of you if you happen to go against anything that's mainstream. I know you guys know this. It's the reason why you become red-pilled. But now, given that context, I brought your brain to that point. How many things are we swallowing that are one of these things where we've been bullied into agreeing that there's 5 fingers being held up instead of 4? The old George Orwell thing. I'll tell you a funny story, man. I was reading an article today that said that Apple and Google are going to get together to make contact tracking more intense using this thing, right, in 2020. Well, that's complete surveillance, complete utter surveillance of your medical. In America, we have something called the HIPAA laws. HIPAA laws protect your medical information, your medical status from any other human being from knowing it. It's so tight. I almost got into this startup in 2003 where this dude was saying that all medical clinics in the United States were going to have to be HIPAA locked down. I mean, they're all going to have super encrypted hard drives, super encrypted software. When you just do data entry or data lookup, that has to be completely locked. And if you walk away from the monitor, it should lock itself. I mean, it was hardcore. But now your medical data is being shared with random human beings through this contact tracking. So that's a violation of your rights right there in America. But I posted, I said, George Orwell wrote 1984 as a warning, not as a guide. And about 2 hours later, some dude replies back, goes, I don't understand your comment here because what does it have to do with this thing in 2020? And I just, irony, man. The dude couldn't put two and two together. He couldn't see the tyrannical control of his life right in front of his face. So he was championing this tyranny right inside the phone. So we all know that there's severity in every circumstance. Some things are super important, some things aren't. All right, so severity assessment, which some investors might call risk assessment towards failing your goal, meaning losing all their money and not making any profit, is something everyone goes through when you build a business. But I'm afraid that folks don't take that same risk assessment technology into their own personal lives to say, okay, well, we take it into our life to say, okay, if you buy a hot rod car or a motorcycle, like a real crotch rockety thing, but even if you got a Harley, it's not if, it's when you get hit by someone who's not paying attention, or you drive a certain way, they don't see you, and maybe you die, and maybe you don't. But of all my friends that have had motorcycle accidents, 9 out of 10 are dead. That's pretty scary assessment. Of course, they rely on you being young and dumb and not realizing your mortality, which is why you buy it and run up and down my main thoroughfare here in Huntington Beach. We have probably, without exaggeration, at least 2 fatalities of a guy by himself riding his bike, trying to do wheelies. We have these guys that just, they'll sit at the intersection, look around, not see the cops, and they go boom, boom. And when it works out, it's actually really fun to watch. But boy, they wrap themselves around poles. They're instantaneously dead. And you're thinking, oh my God, what is that kid, 20, 25, whole life ahead of him, dead because he thought that doing a backflip was awesome. I don't know what guys' obsessions are with doing backflips. Oh my gosh. But now, we don't take this risk assessment consciously, I don't think. I mean, you guys probably do. But we don't take it into our mental paradigm worshiping, paradigm adoption mechanisms and assess, wow, I'm being introduced to a new subject matter. I better be careful about bringing this into my belief system because it may not be true. Damn, that sucks. And I think we need to. The 2 things that I have come to believe that I never thought I would ever, it was one of these things where I couldn't fathom questioning these things. In one case, and the other one I thought for sure was a fake. And, for the OG listeners, you're going to know these subjects, but it would be the Roswell crash in New Mexico being real with 3 little aliens. When you do your research under a very tight aperture of only the people that aren't selling books, that don't have stores with aliens on the front, people who are family members of everyone who saw the stuff, you come to realize it was real. And then the whole thing about paleontology, dinosaurs. Just look up the first 40 years of finding dinosaurs and your brain will be reset about dinosaurs ever being real. Doesn't mean mammoths don't exist and saber-toothed tigers and near species that we have that were a little bit bigger and a little bit weirder, but these big giant brontosauruses and stuff, you won't believe anything anymore. Once you learn that no one's ever seen a real bone before, and the fossils can be created, If you don't believe that, then just do some research. Find out the guy who built a tooth or found a tooth that was 6 inches. It was some calcified tooth. Not sure what it was. He designed a Tyrannosaurus Rex around it and showed it in a museum in the mid 1800s. And gosh darn it, wow, we found a dinosaur that looked exactly like the one that he had never found before, because it was all fiction. It was a Barnum and Bailey circus thing, you know? Then you'll have people that sort of cloud up the data because they have been told about a fable and they want to see it so bad that they go out looking for it. And when they don't see it, they lie and come back and say they saw it. Or they work really hard and create these elaborate hoaxes in the camera. Bigfoot is a huge one. I think it's my episode 300, I think it is, where I covered Bigfoot. And I've said this before, but during the episode, it really dawned on me the mating rituals of a gigantic hominid, and it just all falls apart really, really fast. There's a mating call that would occur. There's the vulnerability of a mother with a baby that would have to be protected during its entire gestation process. The woman would start slowing down because she'd start being burdened with carrying the baby. You know, God forbid she had twins or something. It would be horrendously difficult for her to move around. They would probably die in childbirth. They'd probably build nests. I mean, all these things that they never talk about because we're just so interested in seeing the Loch Ness Monster. Loch Ness Monster doesn't have to have any mates, have any siblings. There's no species. There's no ecosystem for it. It's in a lake that can't grow a weed because it's so stagnant. But no, this thing's swimming around and finding plenty of food. I don't even think there's even fish in that lake. I don't know. But these are paradigms that we adopt to entertain, like a ghost story. And if it's all entertainment for you, then just wax poetic about this stuff. But when you really need to police your brain, it's sort of a toss-up, you know? If the writers of the Bible, let's put it that way, are trying to insinuate that there are things you shouldn't see, probably true. I've said this analogy a couple times on the show, but the soldiers that went off and saw things like Vietnam, they saw horrific things. They did not come home, in a lot of cases, and at least in my memory, and talk about any of them, any of those experiences. Again, my dad's Army buddy did 3 tours. His helicopter's in the Smithsonian. Only now is he starting to write about some of the lighter things that happened to him. But my father was his best friend, and my father told me several times, yeah, so-and-so doesn't talk about these things, any of it. But he said he saw some horrific stuff. He's protecting everyone from those experiences. Can't do anything about the war. It was a fake Gulf of Tonkin incident. 2 incidents never occurred. What would we do if we were to regain the control of the world away from all these weirdies? We would need to redo every form of education. We would need to redo how society should function in general. And because now everything's been totally polluted with different opinions, we would probably have to say, do no harm. That's the key. So if you have a belief system that is pretty radical compared to the people you live around, well, just do it. Keep it to yourself. I mean, you can, as long as you're not doing any harm, you can do it in your front yard if you want, but just don't tell the neighbor's kid that what you're doing is what the kid should be doing. And the parents would teach the kids, okay, there's a lot of different factions in the world. They're all different. Try to respect them. Everybody's on the same page with not hurting each other. And we've got it physically, mentally, and spiritually is where pain and pleasure could both exist. So it's all those paradigms of your brain. But what if we said, as a form of trying to solidify the science that we believe the human beings have discovered that is true, or maybe trying to classify some stuff that's BS, wouldn't observable reality be one of the greatest means of thinking? And say, okay, what's not allowed in here is anything that's going to be techie related, that's going to interfere with observable reality. It's one of the reasons why some of the biggest geniuses in the entire history of humanity have been inventors who sat in laboratories. Was it Bruce Lipton, prodigy medical student? I think he graduated as 25 years old. He was taking all of his medical journals and books that he was learning in school and taking them directly into the laboratory on the same day, the same week, and trying to make sure that what he was being taught was real. And he found out that they were lying about the human cell, saying that the nucleus of the cell was the brain of the cell. When he found out, quite frankly, it was the membrane of the cell that chose everything that went in the cell and out of the cell. If you enucleated a cell and pulled out the nucleus, it lived a full life. It just couldn't recreate, meaning mitosis, and it couldn't repair itself. So he rushed off to his tenure professors and said, oh my God, we're going to rewrite the medical books. Fired. He had to go to Guam to teach medical school. Nikola Tesla sat in a laboratory. Well, his laboratory was in his brain. He said that he wouldn't begin to build a machine until he proved inside of his mind that it worked perfectly. Again, like I've said, the rumors are that he aged ball bearings for a couple of years in his brain to make sure that the design didn't need to be changed. Okay. Well, even without that little tail, this dude invented everything that we're using to make this show occur. All the base controlling mechanisms of electronics, perfected every component, a resistor, a capacitor, a diode, like perfection. And of course, people perfected it more after him and then miniaturized it. The dude was incredible. But when Albert Einstein and the whole, special relativity, general relativity, and quantum physics came around, before he died, he was like, these guys are selling you down the river, man. Which I don't know what that means, but he said they were selling you snake oil theories that don't have anything to do with everything I've ever created. And the one thing that you need to learn to understand everything I've ever created is the ether of space. I won't make this a big ether conversation. For any of you interested in that subject matter, there's a whole playlist. Just search on ether on the channel, and I spell it AETHER. I think I told you guys once a long time ago when I was 18 years old and sort of a little prodigy programmer for the tax company that does TurboTax back in the day before Intuit bought them. I was lured into this project to create an electronics educational package for kids using software to simulate all the electronic components. I was going to illustrate the product and I was going to program the product. And their whole hook was, we want kids to see the same exact experiments that Faraday through Tesla used so they can rediscover electronics. Make it easy, because everything that they did was brilliant in design. But once you see the super brilliant thing done, then you can do it a million times. If someone said, making a root beer float was an ingenious idea, putting root beer and ice cream together, well, that was an ingenious thing that someone else came up with. But if I said, make me one, it's no problem. Some soda, there's some ice cream. Boom, we're done. How's that? Brilliant. Policing observable reality has got to be one technique that we use to police what goes into our souls. But there's a layer on top of that. What if someone from the CERN Hadron Collider said, well, yeah, that's exactly what we do. We have these plates, Sigma 5 algorithm. We watch beams of energy move through these plates, and we track the chronology of it to see whether or not it's noise or an actual subatomic particle. And we discover something else about the universe. There. Case closed. Okay. Well, what we have to do in our brain is simply say the only reality that you're able to sense is the energy that can be tracked by these plates that are the collider plates when the two protons smash into each other. Okay, so that is a machine to track that category of energy. So you want to run off to the spirituality world. Now you're going to have to get that lady from Poltergeist, right? Someone who can summon reliably something supernatural to occur. I think it's interesting to remind ourselves. There's the Skeptic Society that I believe is centered in San Francisco. Used to be that old guy with the beard. I think he probably is passed by now. If he's not, he's got to be 1,000,000 years old. But they've had a long-standing reward for anyone that can prove various outrageous claims. And I think 2 of the claims that they're willing to pay $1 million, and it could be even more nowadays. And I'm willing to bet there'd be billionaires willing to pay a lot more than $1 million to see certain things proven. One was ESP, the communication between 2 humans without speaking, which again, they do the forehead test, and it's definitely a flavor of ESP, where they put 2 human foreheads together for something like half an hour. And then you can go in different rooms that are RF proof, radio frequency proofs, and one's giving you a little shortwave radio of what's going on. And they'll show the person a card, and the other person has to guess what the card is, or a shape or something, some sort of landscape scene in a picture. And the other person's like, oh, I see a lake, oh, geez, wow. But it fades away really quick. It's a very quick experiment. But the other one is telekinetics, the Carrie movie, where someone could move something with their mind force, as Jack Black would say. You're willing to pay $1 million if you can prove it. Okay. It's under very controlled conditions. But everyone who's ever claimed to be able to do this has always been ousted as a fraud. That famous scene where the guy who had built up this whole repertoire of all these powers was on Johnny Carson. And Johnny Carson brought out, with the Skeptic Society guys' help, a tray of, I think they were like little film canisters back in the day. And he said, you got to guess what's inside of them, which one has water, which one doesn't. And the guy just caved on TV. Plenty of psychics who flopped on TV as well. Psychics never seem to know when they're going to get into a fatal accident. I mentioned the Deep Thoughts Radio University as sort of a joke, but it's also a serious condition, or I should say, consideration inside your brain to think about creating a new university that not only has official science in it, everything that we can observe and prove, but also all this other stuff. What university, and maybe this has been done, but, if I was a serious university that had some money off to the side, and we just want to either dismiss something or find something in something, all these near-death people, they do these documentaries together. They never really meet each other that I've ever seen, but they have all these profound experiences that really do call out that something supernatural happened to them, indicating afterlife of a very spiritual realm. Well, if we had Deep Thoughts University, we would solicit all of these people to come to our university to give us their eyewitness testimony again, to probably look up all their records of everything they said to make sure their stories stay straight. And then to have them meet each other and just see what that experience is like. These interesting things are never happening, to my knowledge. Where's the article? Where's the Scientific American explanation of things? No, they're all stories about mathematicians creating algorithms to supposedly indicate that something is real or something is fake. And the only place that exists is on the ink on that piece of paper. They didn't have to have proof that anything that they theorize is true. How could you theorize the Big Bang and say it was real when you can't observe it? Isn't it amazing how everyone swallows that one? Oh, dark matter is supposed to prove that the Big Bang happened. You just take a camera, point it at space, tune in a particular UV ray or spectrum of light and say, oh, that's it. And you see a huge cloud in space. Well, that's definitely it, So we're back on track. Still true. Black holes. Well, man, they've been peddling that goatsy hole in space as some proof that there's a black hole. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. Yeah. To get that image that you saw, that orange ring that they just pushed out in the last 2 years, some, like 10 petabytes of information, as if that validates the claim. Okay, well, we know things blow up in space, regardless of what that stuff is up there, right? You can believe space doesn't exist. Well, shit blows up out there, and you get a sun that goes poof for whatever reason, and it creates a ring of energy. matter you can see, giving off a light, whether it be tiny light or whatever. And these pictures exactly like that have been in astronomy magazines for years. So all you do is you get one that's super far away, so there's no visible light that could be recognized in the center because it's too faint. It's dismissed over space and time, right? And so you have an outer ring, and then they just call that a black hole. They say, oh, that thing in the middle is a black hole. Oh boy, that's real. Observable reality. They created a CG image and sold it to you. We're on Mars because you see pictures. We've been to the moon because you've seen pictures. That's the first deep fake. I told you a long time ago that I believe that truth can be felt in the system. It can be felt in the human body. Now, we know a lot of Christians that believe stuff, and they believe it, and it makes them feel wonderful. Well, there must be some truth in that relationship to God, not all the other extortion that churches play with you to get close to God, but the one you have with because you exist, right? You exist in his bosom. But what we don't know is if you contain a lie and you're unaware that you contain a lie. Society around the world is kind of divided into two groups, one being disturbingly larger than the other, where reality, just like the Russian guy said, cannot be forced into a human mind. Truth cannot be forced into the brain because they have developed such mechanisms over all this political correctness and all this false paradigm adoption, especially in order to gain status with others. You give them the truth and it bounces right off because they built a shield against it. What I want to know is if you carry an algorithm of untruth inside your system every day, does it rot you from the inside? I mean, it's an algorithm of falsehood. I always tell you guys, the universe is perfect. Love it or hate it, it's perfect. Why? Because I haven't turned into a frog and then into a koala and then back into me. The microphone stayed a microphone. The bushes over there stayed a bush. The world stayed a round object or a flat object. Whatever it stayed what it is, and I'm just here. The program had one flaw in its code. You get a glitch that you would not want to experience, most likely. So how can you hold an untruth in your system? Does the universe register an untruth versus a truth? Because you would think that an untruth would be sort of a Cthulhu hymn. Cthulhu is the beast that one of our listeners has a huge Cthulhu collection. It's absolutely hilarious. I love he posts the funniest stuff. But he's the undoing of all things. He's the unlife, like the black sun that was coming at Earth in Fifth Element, the Luc Besson movie. It was going to undo all reality. And of course, the funny thing about the bad guy played by Gary Oldman was that he was going to do a deal with this character as if he was going to be allowed to exist after the deal was done. It's the perfect sci-fi Iago. A man so stupid and so greedy that he can't see his own demise within his own worshiping, which is sort of that sign a deal with the devil formula, Faust. One of the other fun analogies that I find is the analogy of you crash landing with your family safely on a desert island or an abandoned island, not a desert island. It's got plenty of food and all kinds of good stuff on it. You're going to live a wonderful life there. No one's even going to know you're there because let's say it's before man ventured out. The Magellans don't exist yet. And so, or virus takes out 99% of the world and you happen to find this island and no one's going to bother you. So now you get to reset and you see your wife's pregnant or you're pregnant and you're the wife and you got some other little kids that haven't really quite, absorbed reality yet. So you're going to have a chance to fill up their brain. Well, you know that unless you brought a science lab with you, the internet's down, cell phones don't work, unless you brought an Encyclopedia Britannica with you, you're going to be the teacher of all reality. And if you're like me, there's something super exciting about that notion besides getting eaten by a boar or something. But you're going to have to figure out how to do all the stuff you've seen on those Survivor shows because you haven't never built a house before. You're going to look out at the weather and say, what longitudinal wave of my own in the world? Am I going to get hurricanes? It's going to get really cold. What do I need to do to protect my family? But if you're going to teach your kids things, you're going to probably only have the mechanism of observable reality. And then there'll be that precipice moment when you're going to be like the Native American analogy I gave a few episodes back, where someone dies in your tribe and the child or the wife or whatever, husband, is totally distraught over this death. And you're going to tell them a story about their soul turning into a star. And that's going to comfort them for a little while until they grow up and find out that was a story. But they might end up passing that down to their kids when that tumultuous moment were to occur at a premature time. But even if grandma passes away, it'll hurt. So you're going to have this moment when you tell a little fib that's going to give comfort to someone and then launch a belief system that is fake. But it's a medicine for the brain. Because reality can be hardcore, can't it? And so you're going to have to make that choice as an adult as to how you raise that kid, how you develop your society, whether you let in folklore. What if you populate enough, you get there at, say, 20 years old, hence the reason why your kids are so young, and you grow up to be 40, 50, 60, and your kids have multiplied. Well, it's kind of a horrible story. Let's say 2 families, and you keep the genes kind of apart from each other, whatever. It's going to get kind of weird for a while genetically. But Adam and Eve did it, so we'll do it too in this analogy. But there's another group that believes that they should be telling these stories. Or someone runs around and goes, "Oh my God, did you hear, Daddy?" "What?" "Well, I met the local tribes people, and they told me all about the spiritual world and stars being in our souls." And then you're like, oh crap, that just violated my observable reality constraint on teaching my children. Do you burst their bubble? Do you let it go? Do you look at the whole thing and go, well, you know what? We're resetting society. Screw it. We need a little bit of positivity. And if, a little bit of folktale here and folktale there keeps society together. If a belief in God keeps us from killing each other because we're beholden to another being that has morals, yeah, maybe we should do that too. That's why religions are created in the first place, to gain control over society. Again, what I was told by my preachers when they told me about Jesus potentially not existing, but it was more important that we believe in him, was they said without that belief, we wouldn't have had the smallest form of society. And I was kind of like, what are you talking about? They're talking about, law of the jungle. And as I got older and just thinking about the fact that the biggest guy in the village could knock your dad over the head and kill him. And then he has your mother and your sisters, maybe you, if you're a dude, to do whatever he wants with. Maybe he cleans you out because you're a threat to his genetics and he wants his stuff to spread, just like cats do it, right? Cats supposedly will go kill the litter from a previous male to make sure that only his genes spread. I mean, what a weird little instinct that's been installed in cats. Do I think they're sinning in the eyes of God? No. They were programmed to do that. The more you think they're soulless, which most cat owners would never believe that, and I don't believe that, then it doesn't matter at all. But aren't there a lot of soulless people because they can't see one? They've never been in a near-death experience. They were perhaps molested by someone in church, and so they have this horrific vision of church people. I mean, man, it's interesting how there are all kinds of groups of people on this planet, racial groups, religious groups, like belief paradigm groups, right? And they'll have these bad apples that make their whole group look bad, and they don't own it. They don't make a difference publicly and say, okay, just so you know, this guy was punished. He's dead. If anyone else in our group hurts one of your people in your group or one of our same punishment, boom, you're done. Can't have that genetics running around. Let God sort it out. But people don't do that. I have a lot of friends of mine who are of different races, and they see compilation videos online where more specifically their race is doing something that's bad on TV or on the internet or whatever, and they're embarrassed. And they know the problem is too big to own. You can't. What are you going to do? Fix the more underprivileged areas of the world? Well, you can. As long as you put the right leaders in place, they're going to put $500 billion in the neighborhoods to fix them. But you switch out for that group that says, oh, here's your check every month, don't learn how to work. You're just going to create a bunch of useless human beings, and then boom, there's a pounce and your country's gone. It's happening all around the world very slowly. The frog is getting boiled, isn't he? They're not going to keep us around, right? We're a problem. They're going to want that island scenario, but they're going to want to keep the big continents while they do it. I just want to make this episode because I wanted you guys to see observable reality as a mechanism that can hurt you, that can be deceiving the more that this stuff happens. A friend of mine showed the intro to some friends of his associates at work, and he was trying to tell them that I really had built the set, and just to see if they would believe it. And of course, they're all film people, so they're like, nah, we know what he did. It was funny. Had he taken that story home to his family, perhaps, maybe his mother or something who's in her 70s, maybe she would have believed it, you know? It's way too easy now to mess with all those components. So let me know what you think about in the comments. And, hopefully these episodes trigger you just a little bit to think of other things that are associated that are potentially threatening. If you have found a solution to any of these formulas for your own mind to discern incoming information that has been otherwise deemed later in your life through red pilling or through maybe a rare admission by those individuals as being not the truth anymore, which used to be science every 20 years, let us know. Let us know if you have a way of processing information. Maybe where you limit your input and where you focus your input. Maybe that's where some of the solutions are. We're all trying to help each other. These are the episodes I really like, even though they might be a little strange, because I feel like we're getting at the stuff that we all talk about inside our minds. Maybe not with another human being, because we're not surrounded by anyone who thinks like we do. Anyway, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. 2 video, 2 audio, 4 social media, although I got locked out of Twitter today. I was, just to bring you up to date on that one, I've been tweeting more. I've been having fun because there's so much crazy going around the internet. But if you read my posts, you'll know I'm not very controversial. I try to make people think a little bit more. I subscribe to Thomas Sowell. He's really good at it. But I was replying to Jim Acosta's post blaming our president for all the deaths in America, which is like he put 230,000, and then saying how the Johns Hopkins group completely disagrees with anything other than full lockdown situation, right? So I just wrote a reply mentioning Event 201 that the Johns Hopkins group did with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where they simulated the same thing that's occurring in 2020, same exact type of virus last year in August 2019. And they simulated that 63 million people had passed away in America due to this simulated viral thing. A dead giveaway, this is all planned. Whether it be real or not is, something's out there doing something. So it's either a bioweapon being spread strategically to create numbers, or it's a real thing. Be careful either way, of course. Follow whatever you think you need to do to keep yourself safe. But I post this reply. I hit reply. Instantaneously, I think I was using my phone at the time. Boom, the app locks. Just automatically, man. We got to make sure you're not a robot. Actually, it was on my laptop, is right. And I was sent through that robot verification thing with all the little photos, I went through 12 verifications of crosswalks and chimneys and traffic lights and motorcycles and buses, and just over and over and over and over again. And then they said, you've got to verify your account with your phone number all of a sudden. And I changed my number, and I forgot to tell Twitter that I changed my number. So now there's no way to get that text message to give them the code. So I sent them a little message saying, hey, I need your help. So I'm sure it'll be somewhere after November 3rd. I'll get help with that. So that account's kind of dead right now. I just want to put that in there. But there's an all new remastered season 1. For those of you who wonder why I did it that way, it's on a different channel. When you post, they're all numbered 1 through 100, right? I had the microphone like literally half an inch from my mouth. They weren't edited. They weren't balanced audio-wise. So all that's been repaired. But just go to the website, type in the search field, whatever you dig. There's a whole category list up there as well. There's a store, and there's also a couple ways to donate to this movement, which is Patreon and PayPal. But I know pennies are tight, so believe me. Just know you make a difference. You make a huge, if you buy a shirt or whatever, you make a difference. As of this episode recording, which should be 5:07, I haven't redone all the branding for the new season because I'm still trying to figure out exactly what imagery I want to use. So just know that's coming too. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.